Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Is that any better? No, sorry. Here, right? Isn't this better? Okay. Well, welcome in here. We appreciate you. Better late than never for the start of the deeper dive. A busy evening, as you know, here in the Diamond. 13 games. That's a lot. And Neil is here. And Neil has even put aside all of his angst and nerves regarding Game 6 of first round of the Western playoffs with his Minnesota Timberwolves, right? We're not even asking you to focus on that by any means, man. So I know how you're doing. No need to ask how you're doing. You've bitten off all the remaining fingernails that you have ahead of tonight. Is that pretty accurate? Yeah, that's right. I'm excited for tonight. I mean, at this point, what do we have to lose? The Timberwolves, we weren't expecting to win. So if they can just force a Game 7, I'll be satisfied. I'm excited. I love it, brother. I love it, man. So with 13 games and not much time to get through everything, let's just start. You know, normally there's a general theme or something that pops, but usually that's, you know, when we have a shorter slate and when we're kind of looking at some angles here. This is 13 games. This is gigantic. So we'll look game per game. We do have a live before lock coming your way next out there. So hit the thumbs up button. You know the drill. Subscribe. Make sure you're part of the game here. But let's just start and go through game by game, knowing that we don't have a ton of time. We'll start in Baltimore. Look at this matchup here, especially when we have a debut on a team like Baltimore on one side. Rich Hill is on the mound for Boston. So looking at the pitchers first and then kind of approaching the bats and a stack standpoint. Yeah, so we've got Tanner Houck is going to be the long reliever coming in for Boston. So I wouldn't play Rich Hill. I think he's just the opener. He'll probably only pitch 1 or 2 innings most likely.
I don't love Tanner Houck either. He's got some negative leverage. He's at 8,100. He's just a long reliever, which I think probably limits the upside in terms of his pitch count and the innings that he's going to pitch. So I don't have a ton of interest. You could play him. He's playing against Baltimore. Currently slight negative leverage on the top pitchers tool, coming in at 6.2% ownership, 6% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. So I guess that, he's viable if you want to play him. He's probably not one of the first pitchers that I'm going to go to. And then on the other side, I have a little bit more interest in Kyle Bradish. I don't think that he's actually in the top pitchers tool at the moment, which might be just because this is his MLB debut, so we don't really have stats on the guy. But he's 4,000 on DraftKings. This is first start, as I said. He had near a 30% strikeout rate at AAA, so that's pretty promising. We don't really know what his pitch count is going to be, but I think that I'm going to be taking some shots in lineups where I need some salary savings.
Yeah, you hear debut and somebody new out there, and then you immediately see, all right, how is that impacting the stacks, especially from the standpoint of Boston? And again, 13 games, right? 26 teams to choose from this slate. Boston, you would think, would be catching maybe a little bit more of a negative leverage score. And again, it's 514 on the East, so this may change as we get closer, but based off of that alone, I would think people would be getting to Boston a little bit more, Neil, mainly because they're not that as expensive as a couple of other options in that similar range of projection.
Yeah, you would think that people would be going to Boston a little bit more, going up against a pitcher in his debut. They're a talented team, but they do have some negative leverage, even coming in at a 5.7% chance to be in the top stack, but they're coming in at 7.5% ownership. So not my favorite team to stack on the slate just because of that negative leverage. But if you want to, just count on this pitcher coming in, having some jitters, and maybe not lasting that long. I mean, he could come in, have some control issues if he's having jitters. And then you've got Boston going up against the Baltimore bullpen. That's a spot that I would not mind. So I don't hate Boston as a play. They're not going to be the first team that makes it into my lineup. They're not going to be in my first couple lineups, I don't think. But if I had 10 lineups, I actually, despite the negative leverage, I wouldn't mind taking some shots on Boston and just hoping that maybe the Bradish doesn't last that long and that they get to have kind of a bullpen game against Baltimore.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And again, when we have so many games to talk about in this time frame here, we're not going to just sit and try and squeeze blood out of a rock by any means. So with that in Baltimore, we can move on from kind of both stacks there and talk about what's going on in Toronto. And again, these two teams kind of in the middle fours as far as run projection. But if you look at the pitching matchup itself, this might be an opportunity maybe to get to some bats. So if you want to talk, I don't know, you want to start with the stacks here with Toronto and Houston?
Yeah, we can do that.
Let's do that. Looks like some good opportunities.
Yeah, Toronto looks like a fine stack, slight negative leverage in the top stacks tool, but on a 13-game slate in particular, it's kind of hard to predict what the stack ownership is actually going to come in at, just because there's so many teams, and we've got Cincinnati in Coors Field, and we're only projecting that stack for 15.8% ownership, despite having really low salaries in Coors Field. It wouldn't surprise me if they actually come in higher than that, which would then mean lower stack ownership on the rest of these teams. And Toronto is just a dangerous team. So I'm always happy to get to Toronto, even though there is slight negative leverage currently in the top stack tool. I think that they're a fine spot to get to. Again, similar to Boston in that they're a talented team. They could have a great outing. They're probably not one of the first teams I'd get to, but just because of the talent there, they have as good a shot as any to put up 10 plus runs today. So they're a fine team to get to.
Yeah, Houston is just on the other side of it too, right? So you've got a little bit more leverage. You've got some positive score here to work with. Both teams are projected similarly as far as the top stack, kind of in that bottom top range, if you will, top tier, probably a better way to put it. Cost is the same as well. So is it just a matter of deferring to where you can get a little more leverage with Houston?
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, that's basically how I play it. They're both coming in. I mean, Toronto 4.7, Houston 4.6% chance to be in the top stack. So that's pretty neutral. The difference is Houston comes in at 1.4% lower ownership on the stack, which makes me a little bit more interested there. So yeah, for sure, I'm going to have some interest on Houston with their positive leverage here. Not my favorite team, but also definitely, they're up there. They're one of the teams that I would like to get to today.
Now, what are you doing as far as the pitching matchup here? And there's some cost to factor in here. There are 26 to choose from across on the DK slate. So when you have guys that are kind of projected in that mid to bottom range, it's not a death sentence in the sense of like you can't get to anybody here, but if you just look at either of these pitchers, neither are truly projected to do a lot. But again, you might be able to gain some pretty significant leverage if you find an angle for either one.
Yeah, I think they're fine spots if you want to get to them because, as you said, they do both have some positive leverage in the top pitchers tool. Urquidy coming in at only 0.5% ownership with a 2.9% chance of being a top pitcher, and then there's like Kikuchi, 1.8% ownership with a 5.5% chance of being the top pitcher and an 11.7% chance of being one of the top 2 value pitchers. So I think I would be more inclined to get to Kikuchi here. I don't think that I'm going to get to a ton of Urquidy, but Kikuchi, I do have some interest in. He's had some good games in the past. He's only 6,400, so I would not mind getting to Kikuchi. I ran a quick crunch of 500 lineups just to see what I would get to ownership for these players. And I actually capped it at 24% for all pitchers today. I think that seems about right. And I got to 0 of either of these guys across 500 lineups. So just based on their raw projections, I'm not getting into any. If you wanted to give a little bit of a boost to Kikuchi or Urquidy really to get to them, I wouldn't have any issue with it. I think that they're both fine pitchers. There's 26 pitchers on this slate, and I think it's pretty likely, and it's pretty deep pitching slate. So there are enough higher end arms that you can get to that I don't really feel the need to force the issue with these guys. But I think they're fine pitchers if they really work out in your lineup at that salary.
Okay. And that's the key point too, is to try to find the price point that makes the most sense there. So we'll move on to our next game. And again, we're trying to plow through what we can here. Philadelphia, New York, those bats are cooking. The projected run total, though, for a team that's gotten 7+ in 4 straight games against the Rockies has dipped significantly going up against McGill. On the other hand, the Mets are right there with a 3.9 same run projection, Neil. So this might just be a battle of 2 pretty good pitchers on the mound here, and projections would kind of back that up depending on which one of these guys you have more interest in. The ownership is definitely going to shade towards Nola, so the leverage, I imagine, shades more towards McGill.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, they're both solid pitchers. This is a case where if I set my ownership at 24%, my ownership cap on pitches at 24%, I'm naturally going to get under the field on Nola. I think that today is a day where you can just spread out your pitcher ownership. I mean, if you want to get heavy on guys, I take no issue with that either. But I think I'm just going to really spread it out today because I don't have high confidence in any of these pitchers. And basically, the pitchers that I have the most confidence in are going over-owned. And Nola is one of those pitchers. He's cheaper than McGill, which maybe that's why McGill is coming in at only 6.8% projected ownership, but it might be a pay up to be contrarian spot for McGill because he has a 12.3% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. So you can kind of take advantage of other people being scared away, and there being kind of better pitchers around him. I think that you can pay up for McGill and get a little bit of leverage and hope for a boom game there. Whereas Nola, people are willing to pay it. He's coming in at 31.8% ownership at the moment with only a 13.8% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, 8.1% chance of being a top 2 value pitcher. So to me, it makes sense to come under the field on Nola. He's probably not a pitcher that's going to make it into, my first couple lineups, but he is a talented pitcher. So, if you want to play him, you have 8,500. He's a perfectly reasonable pitcher to put in there.
Price is going to jump up significantly, Neil, but it's mitigated, I think, a lot by the lack of ownership on FanDuel. So Nola, although you're paying up, might be a little more appealing due to the leverage you can gain on FanDuel.
Yeah, so I'm currently still seeing some negative leverage here. Maybe I haven't refreshed. I'm seeing he still comes in at 10.5% ownership with a 5.6% chance of being the. So yeah, it's slightly
it's
less
not full,
negative.
but it just better, maybe.
Yeah, maybe slightly better. And
Okay.
Nola he's been a talented pitcher throughout his career. I think there's no reason you can't get to Nola. Really, you look at FanDuel. So we've got 13 games, 26 pitchers. The pitcher with the best top pitcher odds is Lucas Giolito at 7.6%. That's, you rarely see it that low for the top pitcher with the top odds on the entire slate. So I think it makes some sense to just spread it out. And I think that Nola is a fine place to go at 9,900. I'm trying to see if there's other pitchers that I'd rather get to, like around that, just below him in the price point. And not really. There's nobody else that I see as like an immediate pivot for Nola. So if you have 9,900, I have no issue with just playing Nola in that spot.
Look, I mean, to be fair, McGill's got even less ownership as well, so you could play that to it. Now, is there any deterrent here with the stacks, knowing how high both pitchers are projected and how low also, we really have on our top stacks tool, both Philadelphia and New York, as far as their projection.
Yeah, the projections aren't great. They both have positive leverage in the top stack duel. And because I do get different with my bats more so than my pitchers, if I really spend time curating my lineups, I'll probably try to get above the field on both Philadelphia and the Mets. I mean, these are both fairly talented offense. I really like the Mets offense in general. And when they're coming in at only 0.6% ownership, I kind of want to take advantage of that and get above the field. So 0.6% ownership, 1.3% chance of being the top stack. I have some interest in the Mets for sure. And then Philadelphia also 0.7% projected ownership with a 1.9% chance of being the top stack. I have some interest in both of these teams, even though, the matchups aren't my favorite. They just need to get to these pitchers early, and then they'll have a shot at some worse pitchers most likely. So I'd have no issue with, yeah.
Oh, look at that.
All
okay.
right.
That's
okay.
That's good to know.
No Noah Syndergaard.
Yep.
Thank you, News God.
Yeah.
Always timely.
Just as we were about to get in there, right? No Thor. That's good to know. All right. So
I'll need to track that,
yes.
see where who's replacing him.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can move on to that one too, unless there was anything else that you were looking at from either stack.
No, we can move on. We can move on.
Okay. I mean, they're both kind of lower there, but with the Angels, this does change a lot. So let's look at the constant, right? Without getting the Syndergaard news, you had Giolito, you mentioned where he was, and then we can kind of move into what you do on the other end, especially kind of going up against that White Sox lineup. But Giolito is the top projected pitcher that we have, top 2 projected pitcher that we have, not catching the most ownership by any means, but interesting to kind of see where you go with him at the top of the board, Neil.
Yeah, so I'm going to come under the field on Lucas Giolito. I'm going to be a little bit more conservative than I usually am with my pitcher exposures today. So usually I'll set my cap at 30%, 40% for pitchers. I'm going to really spread it out even more than that today, just because the pitching is pretty deep. So I'd rather just spread it out to some of the lower owned high-end pitchers. So I think I'm going to be under the field on Lucas Giolito. He's coming in at 36.9% ownership on DraftKings with a 22.8% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. As usual, he is so he's the top. He has the best odds of any pitcher on the slate to be one of the top 2 pitchers on the slate. So there's no reason that you shouldn't play Lucas Giolito if you have 9,500 to spend, other than the ownership. So I mean, he has the best odds of anybody to be a top 2 pitcher. He's probably a good cash game option, but you could make pivots. So like, for example, Adam Wainwright has a 13.1% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. He's just 100 cheaper than Lucas Giolito, and his ownership is 20% less than Lucas Giolito. So that would be the reason to make that pivot. Giolito is the more talented pitcher. So if you want to go there, I have no issue with it. But typically, I think if you're making a portfolio of lineups, I would probably be trying to come under the field just because there is massive negative leverage there. And then on FanDuel as well, he's as I pointed out, he's coming in at he has a 7.6% chance of being the top pitcher, but he's coming in at 21.8% ownership, so even worse leverage on FanDuel than DraftKings.
What about somebody like Cortes? We'll get to that game specifically, but you're paying up a little bit, but you're gaining a significant amount of leverage.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I would prefer to go to Cortes if you can pay up there, because even though he has a worse chance of being a top 2 pitcher, and he's more expensive. So both of those things go against Nestor Cortes. So it's kind of counterintuitive, but because other people see that too, he's only coming in at 6.2% ownership, and he has upside too. I mean, he can throw a lot of strike. I think he's above 40% strikeout rate so far this year. So that's why I would rather go to Nestor Cortes in general, and I'm going to be above the field on Cortes while I'm going under the field on Giolito.
So this is all new that we get the scratch news, and I'm thinking that it's going to impact pretty significantly how people approach the White Sox stack. So already you gain a little bit of positive leverage score. The Sox are kind of down there in like the bottom tier, if you will, of these 13 teams projected tonight, Neil. But I'm guessing that's going to move up, and people are going to, even though they're costly, they're going to move up based off of the now sudden matchup that they're going to get that should favor them, especially early on, depending on who's in.
Yeah, I think we really can't talk that intelligently right now about that side of the matchup, just because we don't know who is replacing Syndergaard, and we don't know, and that will change the ownership as well. So we'll see a change there. Probably the White Sox will look like a better stack when they're not going up against Syndergaard. But the ownership will probably reflect that as well. So I think we should maybe even just leave this up to the live before lock guys, because they'll probably have more information than we have now. And Terry is as good as anybody to talk about that. So I think we could just skip over the White Sox for now, to be honest.
Let's do it, man. Anything with the Angels bats, since we have no idea what's going on the mound. You do know who they're going up against, and that's Giolito.
Yeah, I mean, you don't love facing Giolito, right? But coming in at 1.3% ownership, that's because they're facing Giolito. The Angels obviously have a really talented top of the order, 2.1% chance to be in the top stack. So I would be inclined to be above the field on the Angels. That's a low enough chance of being in the top stack that, again, they're not going to be the first team that goes into. If I'm making like a single entry, it's probably not going to be the Angels. But if I'm making 10, 20 lineups, I'm probably going to want to have a share of the Angels lineup somewhere, because they've got that positive leverage and they are a talented enough team that you just get to Giolito early and, they can just feast the rest of the game. I can't hear what you're saying right now. Okay. Yeah, I'll move on to the Minnesota game. So we've got Dylan Bundy going up against Corey Kluber. In terms of, I'll start with the pitchers. Corey Kluber, he's 9,200 on DraftKings, I'm still on DraftKings. Okay, we got Corey Kluber, 9,200 on DraftKings, coming in at only 2.1% ownership, but with an 8.2% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. I really like that. I have some interest in Corey Kluber against my Twins today. As much as I hate to play Kluber against my Twins, he's just got positive leverage. So I'm going to suppress my ownership on the higher owned guys and hope to get more of somebody like Kluber. I mean, he is a talented pitcher. He's 36 years old. I don't think that he might be fading off a little bit, but I still think he's got the talent, or at least I think that there's a good enough chance that he's got the talent that I'm going to take some chance there. So I'd be happy to be above the field on Corey Kluber. And then on the other side, Dylan Bundy also has some positive leverage, coming in at only 1.4% ownership.
Not much.
That's really low ownership for a guy like Bundy. 6.2% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, 3.9% chance of being a top 2 value pitcher. Actually, I'm curious now if I get to any of him naturally, if I would need to push him up. I don't get to any Dylan Bundy naturally, so I would need to push him up if I want to get him into my lineups.
So your boys though have a pretty high positive leverage number there for their stacks. You got a 2 versus especially Tampa, though it's kind of flat, but it might be a pretty good opportunity to work some Minnesota bats tonight.
Yep, I love it. I love these opportunities. So I will be doing so. I'll be coming.
Keep your mind off the Grizzlies.
Yeah, right. Exactly. When I can play my Twins and have positive leverage, I'm all about it. I'll go 70% Twins tonight. No, just kidding. 1.6% ownership for the stack with a 3.6% chance of being the top stack. And then a 2.9% chance of being the top value stack. Sign me up for that. We can just hope that maybe Syndergaard is falling, or not Syndergaard, that Kluber is falling off a little bit. He might be. He hasn't been as good this year as he was last year. So sign me up for some Twins for sure. And then Tampa, as you said, pretty neutral today, coming in at 3.1% ownership, 3.1% chance of being the top stack. But Tampa, they're always dangerous. I'm happy to get right at the field. I might even go a little bit, give myself 4 or 5% Tampa, just because they are such a dangerous team. I wouldn't mind taking some of them against Bundy.
Yeah, and you're not gaining, you're not losing anything, but I mean, it's not like they're a -6 or 6.1 that we'll see with a couple of other teams. So a flat leverage score is by no means a negative thing to attack or approach by any means there. So, all right, Twins get it. Do they win this game tonight? Is there at least one thing that, is it a Minnesota sweep tonight?
It's a Minnesota sweep tonight. Yeah,
wow.
They're not favored against Tampa. Twins coming in 3.9 runs, Tampa 4.1. I don't care about that. They're going to go into Tampa. They're going to win this game. And then the Timberwolves are also going to beat Memphis clearly. I mean, that goes without saying. The Timberwolves are going to win game 6, force a game 7, and then go in and beat Memphis in Memphis. So yeah, I'm all about Minnesota sports tonight. They both get it done.
I love it. I can feel that. It's palpable, the energy coming through the screen, Neil. I love that. All right. So we can't talk about the Twins all night. I'm sorry. We do have a couple more that we have to plow through. Let's go to Texas. little different here as far as the gap between projected run score. Rangers only at 3.7, Braves though at that 5 number. We've got Richards and Anderson as the pitching matchup. So especially with the Braves kind of in the backdrop with that higher run projection total at 5, let's just look at this from more of a pitching matchup and mentioned if it's Anderson or Richards, kind of looking at where we have projected, Anderson's going to be that 8,900 and nobody really getting to him much at all. And then the same thing is just at the complete bottom of Spencer Howard, where he's not even coming up with like 100th of a point in order to be a top pitcher tonight.
Yeah, I think I have some interest in Ian Anderson coming in at only 0.5% ownership with a 6.1% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, 2.6% chance of being a top 2 value pitcher. I'm not afraid of the Texas lineup. I think I'm happy to go to Ian Anderson today. I don't think that I'm going to touch any of the Texas pitchers. I'm not going to be playing Spencer Howard or Garrett Richards. Not a lot of interest there for me. I think I'm most likely just sticking with Anderson here.
Yeah, it makes sense, man. Right there at the bottom for sure. Oh yeah, I don't know why. Yeah, for that as well, Richards or Howard. So let's look at the stacks here, and I think this is where it gets a little interesting because of the projected run total, the projection of where we have Atlanta in the top stack tool. But of course, we're not alone, right? Everybody's up on that one. They have a pretty significantly negative score here at -6, 6+. So let's look at the Brave stack and kind of how you're dealing with that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a spot where it's pretty clear to me that I want to go under the field on the Braves. I can see why people want to get to the Braves in Texas, not an imposing matchup there, but that's why people are getting to them. 13.1% ownership, 7% chance of being in the top stack. So pretty massive negative leverage there. I think I'm probably going to go under that 7% number. Maybe I'll play 4 or 5% Braves full stacks in my lineups, and then other than that, I'll just get to some Braves as one-offs and in my secondary stacks. But I don't want to play a ton of Atlanta just because of the ownership is so high on that stack.
And there's no way to kind of cut that down, right? Mitigate that because of just the pay up options are going to keep popping up in smaller man stacks.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as I said, I'm happy to play them as one-offs and in secondary stacks. I just, because the full stack is going owned, I don't really see a way to play that lineup in a way that I really love.
Well, Texas, though, you can gain some leverage here a little bit, at least towards the field. So it's really about the matchup and how much, as you mentioned there, I know you're getting to some Ian Anderson, but that's not going to preclude you, I'm sure, from getting to a couple of Texas stacks.
Yeah, liking the pitcher never keeps me from also liking the stack on the opposite side. And this is another case where, I'm going to get to some Texas. 2.3% projected ownership, 3.1% chance to be in the top stack. I'm happy to play Texas against Ian Anderson in this spot.
Okay, so we'll keep it moving here from the Braves Rangers game. Mentioned that we have this kind of interesting backdrop with that Yankees game in Kansas City, and it's a similar scenario we just talked about. One team with a pretty low run projection as far as the Yankees at 3.3. Royals, though, a little higher now, over that 5 number range. So we've got Zimmerman, Taillon kind of on the hill here as far as an approach. Where do you begin as far as being able to kind of, if it's leverage, or we talked about Cortes, pardon me, if it's leverage there with Cortes, really spending up, but nobody else seems to be doing that as well. So he seems, at least on the surface, and we talked a little bit about McGill, but Cortes seems to be a really strong option if you're looking to fade the field and spending your money on a pitcher as opposed to maybe some stacks.
Yeah, this is very much a pay up to be contrarian spot with Cortes. He's the only pitcher to reach 10,000 on this slate. Everybody else is below that. So I think that kind of scares people a little bit. Just they don't want to pay up that much, especially because he's not the best pitcher on the slate. Like, there's no reason that he should be more expensive than Giolito and Montas and some of the other guys around him. They look like they have Giolito and Montas are the ones that have a better chance than he does of being a top 2 pitcher. So people see that and they say, well, I'd rather just pay less for a guy who has a better chance of being a top 2 pitcher. And that makes perfect sense. And that's why it leads to him being under-owned, though. So I really like Cortes, despite having only the 3rd best chance of being a top 2 pitcher. He's probably my favorite pitcher just because people aren't getting to him. He's only coming in at 6.2% ownership. And he does have over 40% strikeout rate so far this year. It's probably not sustainable, but we can hope that he sustains it for one more game.
Well, check it out on FanDuel, man. It's even less as far as the field. The price doesn't change And now you add a Frankie Montas who's over 10K to the field here on FanDuel. So if you like what you're getting with Cortes against the field on DraftKings, I imagine you're going to love it on FanDuel.
Yes, I am. That is great on FanDuel, coming in at 1.1% ownership.
How is that possible?
Yeah, I don't quite understand how that is possible, especially with Montas being more expensive. I mean, Montas is way cheaper on DraftKings than Cortes. He's more expensive here and still coming in at over 20% more ownership than Nestor Cortes. So yeah, sign me up for some Cortes on FanDuel as well.
I love it. All right. So the flip side, I guess, would be trying to work the offense. And as great as Cortes, it feels like this is a Yankees night, right? As far as our projections with the leverage score that we have compared to where the field is getting, you have three teams, three stacks, Neil, that are getting double-digit projected ownership on DraftKings. The Yankees are not one of them, yet the Yankees have the highest top stack percentage. I get that you're paying up some, and some of these stacks are super cheap, but it's a pretty strong positive leverage score for the top projected stack, even on a 13-game slate.
Yeah, I love the Yankees. I mean, I've talked about, teams that I would not consider when I'm making just one lineup. If I'm making just one or two lineups for like a high stakes entry or something, if I'm doing a single entry, the Yankees are probably my top team in there. As you mentioned, they have an 11% chance of being the top stack on the slate, which is the highest of any team on the slate, and yet they have positive leverage. You don't see that often. Usually the teams that have the best odds have negative leverage because people see, oh, the Yankees, I want to slam the Yankees, and they end up being overowned. In this case, they're coming in at only 8.6% ownership with an 11% chance of being the top stack on the slate. So they are the team that I would most like to get to, followed, I think, kind of closely by Colorado would probably be my number 2 stack on the slate. But the Yankees at the moment would be my number 1 with a bullet.
Is there anything that can shake out on the other end? I know that Cortes pops up so great when you look at the leverage score, but he's also such a part of that is because he's such a highly projected pitcher tonight. So I get that you're gaining some, maybe a half a leverage point or so with Kansas City, but with the cost associated with the risk, is it even worth it to get to a bunch of KC stacks? Not to fade them, but just to get to a bunch, maybe significantly over the field.
Yeah, I mean, probably not significantly over the field, but when they're coming in at 1.2% ownership, you only have to play about 3% Kansas City in your stacks to be above the field in a way that I'd like. So I think that I'd probably try to get to about 3% Kansas City, and that's enough for me. Coming in at 1.2% ownership, 1.7% chance of being the top stack, 1.8% chance of being the top value stack. Those are the kinds of stacks that I'm not in love with them, but I want to get a little bit above the field. It's a home game. Maybe they get it. Maybe the crowd gets into it and they score some runs here. I mean, it's not really a narrative that I'm buying into. I'm just trying to think of reasons to play Kansas City. I mean, Cortes, it's not like he's the best pitcher in baseball. We can't be that afraid of playing against Nestor Cortes. I could definitely see Kansas City, getting to him early and often. So I'm happy to get to some Kansas City stacks. I'll want to be above the field, maybe 3 or 4%.
Yeah, which makes sense. And the reason why I ask, of course, for those out there is simply because normally we bring this situation up to counter a guy, Giolito. We talked about Montas getting 44% of the field, Nola even north of 30%. So even if you like a guy to the same level as we talked about Cortes, you can gain a significant amount of leverage against the field if one of these high-owned guys just blows up. But if Cortes blows up, you're not really gaining much because he's so low owned. So it makes sense across the board there from that standpoint, Neil. All right, man, you want to move to Milwaukee?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, Hendricks, Hauser, let's start on the mound. We'll move to the stacks there. Chicago, not a great night as far as run projections are concerned, but at least from the pitching matchup here, and we constantly are looking with Hendricks or Hauser, we're constantly looking here to try and find anything against the field. They're both really right there, same numbers, pretty much the same guy. If you were to remove the names tonight and just look at the costs, the projection, and even the leverage.
Yeah, they both look like solid plays in the top pitchers tool. I don't think I'm going to get to a ton of either of these guys, even with suppressing my cap on pitchers and spreading it out. I still don't think that these are guys that I'm going to be getting to a ton of. In the crunch that I ran, I didn't get to any of either of these guys, but it's fine if you, I mean, they both have positive leverage in the top pitchers tool. If you want to be, spending even more time than I do on your lineups and really try to get two guys that have positive leverage, these guys both fit the bill. Kyle Hendricks coming in at 0.5% owned with a 3.5% chance of being one of the top two pitchers, a 2.2% chance of being one of the top two value pitchers. And then Adrian Hauser, again, 0.5% chance of being 0.5% projected ownership with a 3.2% chance of being one of the top two pitchers, 3.8% chance of being one of the top two value pitchers. They're both fine mid-range options. If you want to go there, there's no reason not to. They have positive leverage on that ownership, but it's just not probably a way that I'm going to be getting different today. I'll be getting more different with my bats.
Well, let's talk about that, because you do have a little bit of room with Milwaukee, a lot more, I think, or a little, I would say, significant with Chicago, a little bit of a gap between the two. So where is the target for you between Chicago or maybe Milwaukee to start with in this game, especially because neither one of these pitchers are really jumping out?
Yeah, so Chicago looks great, coming in at 0.9% ownership with a 3% chance of being the top stack, 1.4% chance of being the top value stack. They are one of the most positive leverage teams on the slate. So definitely sign me up for getting above the field on Chicago. I'll probably, want to get above that 3% top stack odds as well. And then Milwaukee, they have the same top stack odds as Chicago, coming in at 3% chance of being the top stack, but then they're coming in at 2.4% ownership. So they just come in at much higher ownership than the Cubs. So I'd rather get to the Cubs between the two of them, but they both have positive leverage on this slate. Sign me up for both of these offenses, at least above the field. Neither of them is my favorite offense, but Chicago is the second highest positive leverage spot on the slate just because the ownership is so low. So they're looking pretty good. Actually, Chicago, right. Yeah. As I'm thinking about more, I'm under 1%. I will have some interest in Chicago. I might even get up to 6% or so of the Cubs here.
Yeah, because you can, to your point, you're working that positive leverage score.
Yeah,
over
exactly.
Two.
Exactly okay. Right.
All right. So from Chicago, let's go, or Milwaukee, pardon me, St. Louis, a guy you already mentioned here at Adam Wainwright, as far as a counter, a pivot to what we were talking about earlier, especially as far as higher price guys. I know Nola and McGill, two guys that we were looking at earlier, Wainwright being an interesting topic with that. So here's the opportunity to go a little deeper on Wainwright, also Madison Bumgarner on the other side. So if you just look at our top pitchers tool, again, hit that thumbs up button, please. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed. We want you taking advantage of our weekly pass here across the board. It's $29.95 a week. You get access to everything across the board. You don't have to wait one day a week and hope that today is the day in which top pitchers tools are free so that you can listen to Neil and follow along. Just get in $29.95 a week for the Awesemo Plus package, and you're just ready to roll here. So with that said, my friend, let's look a little deeper here with Wainwright, because I think Wainwright was interesting, looking at where he is from a cost standpoint, maybe even a pivot standpoint, and also gaining or a little more leverage, even if it's a negative leverage score, a little more leverage, pardon me, than some other guys we talked about a little earlier that are higher above him.
Yeah, so Wainwright, he's not my favorite pitcher on Sunday. I mentioned him earlier in the context of if you have $9,500 to spend on Lucas Giolito, the one reason to switch to pivot to Wainwright is the ownership, because he has 20% less owned than Lucas Giolito. With that said, he does still have negative leverage in this spot. So it's not like he's my favorite pitcher to get to. Coming in at 16.1% ownership, 13.1% chance of being a top two pitcher, 4.4% chance of being a top two value pitcher. He's not a pitcher that I'm really targeting. He's just, he's an interesting pivot to Giolito, because even though he has a lower chance of being one of the top two pitchers, he's got closer to neutral leverage there. So I'm happy to get to some Wainwright. He's a pitcher that I will probably be close to the field on, I think.
As far as Bumgarner is concerned, there's a lot of room to be overweight here. Only a small percentage of people getting to him on DK.
Yeah, I mean, he's only coming in at 0.5% owned. He's not the same Madison Bumgarner that he was, 10 years? How long has Madison Bumgarner been in the league? Feels like he's been in the league forever.
15 years.
Yeah, right? So he's not the pitcher that he once was, but he's only 7,100. So he has a 4.1% chance of being one of the top two pitchers, 5.9% chance of being one of the top two value pitchers. If you have 7,100 left over at your pitcher spot, I think that he's a perfectly reasonable spot to go. I'm not going to force myself to get to a ton of Mad Bum, but I think that I wouldn't mind having some of him in my lineups at 7,100.
The flip side here would be the stacks to kind of look at before we move on and see how much it's worth it. Again, Arizona is kind of in that bottom chunk. So like KC, you have room to get over the field here with both of these stacks, even though St. Louis is barely a negative leverage score.
Yeah, I kind of like both of these stacks just at the suppressed ownership. I mean, we have 26 teams on this slate. So I guess it makes sense that every team is coming in at super low owned. Arizona coming in at 0.6% owned with a 1.5% chance of being the top stack, 2.4% chance of being the top value stack. I'm going to come over the field on Arizona, maybe 3-4%. And then St. Louis, as you mentioned, has slight negative leverage coming at a 2.8% ownership on the stack with a 2.6% chance of being the top stack on the slate and a 0.6% chance of being the top value stack. I'm probably going to cap myself at about 2% St. Louis. They are not one of the first teams that I'm going to get to on this slate. Arizona, if you wanted to go there and, your first 5-10 lineups, I think that they're a team that you could get to. They have enough positive leverage there, but I don't love either of these teams. If I had to choose one, it would be Arizona.
Okay, no, it makes sense. You don't have to choose one, but I get where you're leaning by all means. So we'll move to Colorado. Some pretty high run projections as expected with the Reds in town. Reds, Rockies, both at 5-7. Green, Sensatella on the mound. Let's start there and then kind of move to the more obvious would be the bats. Let's just start with the pitchers and kind of how you're working through either or both.
Yeah, so currently we have Hunter Green at 0.5% projected ownership, 5.8% chance of being one of the top two pitchers, 10.9% chance of being one of the top two value pitchers. So those are really nice numbers, playing some Hunter Green. So I need to run a new crunch to see if I get to some naturally. My guess is that I won't, just because their pitching is so deep that you don't really need it. But if you have 6,500 to spend, he's one of the better options. I don't actually see any pitcher above him that has that you can fit within his salary that has a better chance of being one of the top two pitchers on the slate. So if you're hand building, you have 6,500 left, I would probably go right to Hunter Green. I think that he's a perfectly reasonable spot coming in at 0.5% ownership. I'd take him over Kikuchi in a vacuum. And then on the other side, Senzatella coming in at 0.5% owned with a 1.5% chance of being one of the top two pitchers on the slate and a 12.5% chance of being one of the top two value pitchers on the slate. I would probably rather get to Kyle Bradish at 4,000 just because he's cheaper. If you have 5,000, I guess I have no issue going to Senzatella. There is some leverage there on all the people who are going to want to be playing the Cincinnati stack. So he is in a great leverage spot, and he is 5,000. He's one of the cheaper pitchers on the slate. So there is definitely some reason to get to Senzatella with all of that leverage. I think I'd rather go to Bradish, but I definitely see some merit to go into Senzatella if you have 5,000 left over.
Pretty strong negative leverage score for Cincinnati on the bat side. Colorado, though, at home, you've got a pretty good way to maneuver around that with some ownership. It's just the complete opposite, right? Spending up for Colorado versus the opposite with Cincinnati.
Yeah, Cincinnati is just extremely cheap today for a Coors play. Usually team goes to Coors and they price them up another $1,000 per player. They didn't do it for the Reds today. Not a great offense, but man, it's a tough spot because they, like you said, they have negative leverage in terms of their top stack odds, 15.8% chance, 15.8% ownership on the stack, 10% chance of being the top stack on the slate, but they do have a 36.7% chance of being the top value stack on the slate. So from that standpoint, there is arguably some positive leverage there. So I wouldn't mind playing a lot of the Reds here today. Honestly, the 15.8% ownership doesn't really scare me. I think I might allow myself to get above the field on Cincinnati, despite the negative leverage in terms of top stack value. It's just, man, so cheap in Coors Field, hard to avoid if they're really only going to be 15.8% owned. I'd rather get above that number. And then Colorado, as you said, has positive leverage coming in at 6.5% ownership with an 8.2% chance of being the top stack on the slate. And only a 1% chance of being the top value stack on the slate because they are a lot more expensive than the Reds. But again, with the more expensive teams, I don't really care as much about the top value odds. You're just kind of hoping to get a lot of points out of your stack and then hoping that the cheaper pieces around them work out. So I actually like both of the Coors Field teams today.
Yeah, I think it's worth the risk, both ends, to deal with the negative leverage, like you said, with the cost, and then also taking that risk with Colorado that has that positive leverage. at home, even though you're spending up. So both make sense. Agree totally. Let's move to Oakland. Final 3 games here in the 7 minutes or so. So we'll do our best to kind of squeeze through everything. Let's look at the pitching matchup first, then the bats to see what you like there. Let's start on the mound, Neil.
Okay, so Frankie Montas, only 8,100. He has the second best chance of being one of the top 2 pitchers on the slate, not even factoring in his salary. So he's, he's not one of the most expensive pitchers on the slate, but he is one of the most likely to be a top 2 pitcher. So you really like that. The part that you don't like then, of course, is the ownership. Coming in at 44% owned, people see the same thing that we see, that he's, wow, why is Frankie Montas so cheap in this spot? So then he's coming in way over owned. So I'm going to be coming in well under the field on Frankie Montas, probably right at that 24% cap that I'm currently setting. I might change that. Might be a little bit lower, might be a little bit higher, but I'm going to be well under the field on Frankie Montas. He's not a full fade for me. You could fully fade him, honestly, if you really wanted to, and just hope that one of the other 25 viable pitchers on the slate or 2 of the other 25 pitchers on the slate outperforms him when he's this high owned. That's not the way I'm going. I'm not going to full fade him, but he's definitely not the pitcher that I would want in, if I'm just making one lineup. I wouldn't go there first just because he's so high owned in this spot. And then on the other side,
makes sense. Yeah, Savali.
Aaron Savali, I do have some interest just based on the top pitchers tool there. He's only 6,900 on DraftKings, pretty nice there. 5.1% projected ownership, 7% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, 11% chance of being a top 2 value. So those numbers look really nice for Savali. I would have some interest there. If you have 6,900 left over, he's a perfectly fine place to go.
Now, both of these stacks are towards the bottom, so including Cleveland, which is rock bottom. So if you don't like anything or even love anything, then feel free to breeze by whatever you want.
Yeah, so some positive leverage there on Cleveland, 0.6% projected ownership, 1.2% chance of being the top stack. Yeah, you could, and it's a leverage spot because Montas is going so high owned. I do like Cleveland better because obviously if people are wanting to go to Montas, they're not going to Cleveland. So I do want to go above the field on Cleveland. I'll probably have 3%, maybe not an exorbitant number, but I'll definitely be getting above the field. And then Oakland against Savali, 1.3% projected ownership on the stack, 1.7% chance of being the top stack, 5.4% chance of being the top value stack. That's a perfectly reasonable place to go. Yeah, I'll sign up for going above the field on both of these teams as well.
All right, Anderson, and we also have Alexander kind of there at the bottom. Maybe Tyler Anderson, a good place to start, seeing how you're going to maneuver with a guy who's got double-digit number as far as projection for a top 2 pitcher tonight.
Yeah, and he's on the Dodgers, which gives him a better chance of getting the win. I do like some Tyler Anderson tonight at 7,700 going up against Detroit. 7.3% projected ownership with an 11% chance of being one of the top 2 pitchers, 9.9% chance of being a top 2 value. I think that Tyler Anderson is definitely a reasonable place to go, and I'm going to want to be above the field on Tyler Anderson tonight. If I'm not getting to any, naturally, I'll probably give him a little boost to get above the field. And then on the other side, Tyler Alexander, I probably am not going to get there. I'm not going to force that in against the Dodgers. Even at 5,900, I think we've got enough better options around that. I'm not really interested in Tyler Alexander.
So what are you doing with the Dodgers stack, right? Clearly one of the higher projected stacks. You're paying up for them, catching some ownership, and as a result, some pretty negative leverage.
Yeah, I'm going to be under the field on the Dodgers for sure. As you said, coming in at 12.3% ownership with only a 6.3% chance of being the top stack, 0.7% chance of being the top value stack. There's just no real reason to play the Dodgers based on the top stack tool. Obviously, the reason to play the Dodgers is that they're the Dodgers. They are, as Terry says, the NL All-Star team. They're going up against Tyler Alexander. So there are plenty of good reasons to play the Dodgers, but just based on the top stacks tool and the number of games on the slate, I just don't feel the need to go to the Dodgers in this spot and take on that negative leverage. I'll be under the field for sure. They are the second worst spot in terms of leverage on this slate. And I mean, Cincinnati, I said that I like Cincinnati. They are the third worst spot on the slate in terms of negative leverage. You also have to look at their odds of being a top value because they are so cheap. Cincinnati just allows you to pay up everywhere else. So that's my reasoning for liking Cincinnati and not liking the Dodgers, even though you just look at the leverage score, the Dodgers and Cincinnati are pretty even there.
Okay. Okay, makes sense. All right, brother. Last game then. We got here, right? We even have like a minute or two
Man, that's
to
impressive.
exhale.
Well done. Well done.
It is. Well done by you. I'm just, moving it along. You're the one who's getting it all concise, which is very
No,
difficult.
it's on the host. You did this. All right, let's get to it.
Yeah, right. We're wasting time patting
are.
each other on the back.
Yeah.
Nats, Giants. Let's look at the pitching matchup. Sanchez, Wood, start there, then move to the bats.
All right, so Nats Giants. Let me find. Okay, we got Alex Wood. Okay, going up against the Nats. Negative leverage here. 19% ownership. 12.3% chance of being the top pitcher. 6.4% chance of being the top value pitcher. I'm obviously going to be wanting to come under the field on Alex Wood. You know the story. Just I don't like the negative leverage there. I don't love going up against the Nationals. To be honest, it's not a spot that I love. So I'm going to be coming under the field on Wood for sure. And then Aaron Sanchez, I'd say kind of the same boat as Tyler Alexander. It's just he does have some positive leverage on the top stacks tool. He's just not a place that I need to go. I think that there are enough pitchers with upside on this slate. It's a deep enough pitching slate that I don't really feel the need to be going to an Aaron Sanchez at 6,100. Yeah, I'm probably just going to fade him.
Now, as far as the bats are concerned, as we wind down here, Neil, you can get to San Fran, some decent leverage here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely interested in some San Fran coming in at 2.5% ownership with a 4.4% chance of being the top stack. You know the drill. I like teams with positive leverage. They're just coming
Beautiful.
in under owned. That's all it is to me. I'm going to be wanting to play some San Francisco stacks. They're not the first team that I'm gonna get to. But they are probably one of the first. If I make 5 lineups, I'm probably going to want a San Francisco stack in there somewhere. Sign me up. And then on the other side, Washington, they're only coming in at 0.6% ownership. I mean, that's the reason you want to get to him. You don't love the matchup with Alex Wood, but 1.5% chance of being the top stack, 2.4% chance of being the top value stack. They are a talented offense. I am perfectly happy getting to some Washington lineups. I will be over the field.
Amazing that we got through all of this here. Thanks to Mike Awesemo. Thanks to Chris, the guys behind the scenes that made this thing work for us today. To Neil as well, to me and you and all out there. We're just grateful to have guys like Neil here to give some insight. So let's collectively say one thing on the way out to make Neil Orfield's night. Go Wolves.
Go Wolves.
Right? There you
Wolves
go.
in 7.
There you go. Hey, Wolves in 7. Love it, brother. See you next week. Thanks.
See you next week.
Have a great night, guys. Thanks again for hanging. Thumbs up. Subscribe.
lineup so I can confirm so I can start uploading a CSV.
Yeah, I was hoping that I could get everything where I needed it for the show. Not quite there yet. Only two. Yeah, still good. What's happening, Awesemo MLB fans? My name's Terry McBride. I just got done trimming my beard for Linda Webbing in chat so that she won't yell at me. That's Gundacker. We're here to talk about the MLB DFS slate. Gun, let's dive right into this thing, man. We've got 13 games to discuss, not a lot of time to do it in. The guys with the deeper dive just did a great job breaking down game by game. We're going to go through top pitchers, value pitchers, top stacks, value stacks, talk some bats, talk some arms, figure out where the key inflection points on this thing are, how to handle everything. But first off, man, in a short form, how you doing today, bud?
We're pretty good. Happy for Friday night baseball, where everything will go chaotic, but that's Friday night big slates, man. It's a tale as old as time, especially when Coors is in the mix.
Yeah, that's it. And Coors is going to be definitely a big talking point for us tonight. I think everybody industry-wide seems to have forgotten that the Reds were playing at Coors today, so that's a just ridiculous point of value. But we'll get into some of that as we go. We are brought to you today, guys, by Odd Shopper. As you know, that's our sister site. Tons of great stuff over there. If you're a sports bettor, I really encourage you to check it out. We'll get into that, and we'll talk about them in a little bit. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe link down there. It helps us out a whole hell of a lot, and it helps you guys get notifications when we go live. And with all the shows that we're doing, I mean, did everybody realize we had a live watch party for like 3.5 hours during the NFL draft last night? You got to get those notifications so you know when we're going live, you don't miss a thing. If you check out the site, we've got free premium tools and data tonight, which is the NBA player rankings, MLB ownership, NHL player projections, and MMA fighter rankings. So pretty good swath of free content up on the site. Hit the like, hit the subscribe. We're going to dive headlong into this thing. Gun, talk to me just off the top kind of about your pitching overview. What are you doing on the mound today before we get into like kind of breaking down pitcher by pitcher who we like the best? What do you how are you dividing up shares of pitching today?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be spots where I go opposite ownership just because of baseball and its leverage, but I have found myself kind of chalk donkeying it up with Frankie Montas so far. I just feel like he's way too good for 8,100, so I'll overthink or underthink elsewhere. So he's been number one for me. And then kind of sprinkling behind him, I'm getting really pretty even shares of like Nola, McGill, guys like that. And then even a tier below, Nestor Cortes, I don't think he should be 10K. You know that, he's a funky guy, but I still think he has a chance at 25 plus fantasy points, and it's not a 0% range of outcomes. So he's going to be in the mix for me as well. But then it's just wide open after that. So I'm pretty well, I like to put a big stake in a couple of pitchers, and then I get different with my stacks. And I just really focus on hoping I got the right decision at pitching. And Frankie Montas is the guy for me. I'm going to do or die with him.
Yeah, I like the looks of Frankie today. He's one of my top projected pitchers, definitely one of the sites. I love the 8,100 price tag in terms of just the value it provides on DK. And I think at 10-3 or at 10-2 on FanDuel, actually, he's a little bit maybe underappreciated, just given that, you're paying way up to get to him as the highest price pitcher. But when the other guy in the 10Ks is Nestor, and then you get a lot of also ran kind of options, there's a lot of good pitchers, or there are very good pitchers who are in tough spots. Like I think Giolito and I think Nola, I think the world of both those pitchers, neither one in a great spot in their matchups. So we've got that factor. Then we've got a lot of just, third caliber starters or capable veteran types like Adam Wainwright in this slate. So there's a lot of different directions to go, but it's very flat, particularly on the one pitcher site. We had the top of the board was, the last I saw, Montas was 7% likely to be the top FanDuel pitcher. Yeah. So you got Montas at 7.7% at the top of the board. And then you can go all the way down to Tanner Houck at 4%, is call it 10th, 12th, somewhere around there. I was using Savali earlier in the day as the example of that. He rose from 4 to 4.1% and climbed a little bit. He's an interesting value pitcher on both sites to me. There's just a lot of different directions to go, but I do think it makes sense to look at Montas there. So we'll talk Montas in a second, but you mentioned the guy I think is a great entry point for the slate, Nestor Cortes, pitching for our Yankees. Crafty lefty. I mean, he is the definition now of a crafty lefty. He gets by with 91-mile-an-hour stuff and middling kind of repertoire of breaking stuff, but he keeps guys off their toes with pace, with timing. changing up his arm angle, changing the break on some of these pitches. How much do you believe in this guy? And then what do you think of him in this spot, particularly for tonight at price and at ownership? Because I think he's at least interesting tonight.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Value is super subjective. Any pitcher on DraftKings that gets me 25 fantasy points, man, that's a puncher's chance, and all I got to worry about is having the right bats in it. So I do think that's a reasonable outcome here. I do think individually he's probably overpriced based on recent success. Like you said, if you look at just metrics, the metrics would tell you, Sierra xFIP, since the beginning of last year, a little bit higher than the results, but the results are kind of intangible because he is not the same every pitch. The different arm slots, angles, the deliveries, kind of like a little lefty Johnny Cueto when Cueto had that big season to a lesser extent. So a lot of fun to watch. I think, like I said, individually overpriced, but pricing really doesn't matter at the end of the day because there's so many cheap bats. And then, guys like Frankie Montas come in on that regard. So the way I kind of divvy up my pitchers on DraftKings, can you get me over 20 fantasy points? Does it happen often? Yes. Welcome to the player pool. Let's ride.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. And, look, it's a small sample so far this season. He struck out 44% of hitters. It was something like 26 of, 57 hitters or something crazy like that when I wrote about it earlier. But what you have to love is the leverage that you're getting with him. And I know everybody is complaining about, we're talking about leverage and everything. These are the most important things, guys, when we talk about DFS strategy. You can get anybody up here to read off baseball stats to you. And it was exactly the opposite of a comment that I saw in chat earlier today. The important thing to get into is the leverage, is the ownership, is the probability of this guy being the top starter. And according to all of our tools, he is the best leverage position on the mound today. Looking at the FanDuel slate, a 6.2% probability of being the top starter. That ranks him fourth, but it's 7.7 at Frankie Montas, and then two guys who are essentially tied with Nestor at triple the ownership of their probability of success, where Nestor comes in at a 1.9% ownership. He's a third as owned as he is likely to succeed. It's a similar story with bigger numbers on it. He's about half as owned as he is likely to succeed to be a top 2 on the DK slate. He just makes sense. Any concerns for you, though, Gun, knowing the type of pitcher that he is, going up against the Kansas City lineup that is excellent so far this year and excellent all of last year in the aggregate, avoiding strikeouts against left-handed pitching and keeping the ball in play? It's a hit tool inclined kind of a team, and they don't strike out that much against lefties. Any concern that just the way that Nestor pitches, that might impact his general ceiling? And then any concern still lingering about the weather in this one? That was a concern earlier. I was worried about maybe the potential for a start and stop impacting Nestor's upside.
Yeah, so I try not to play weatherman. I just trust what's out there, and it looks like it could be in game, it could not be in game. So certainly an asterisk that could make this game pretty sketchy. Weather becomes pretty unpredictable, and at 10K, you're gambling on some clear skies, or that they play through and it doesn't affect them. So I am worried about that. Absolutely. I thought it was weird that Nicky Lopez leading off here, lefty versus lefty. I thought that was a little. Why wouldn't you lead off with Merrifield there? But other than that, yeah, there's not a ton of strikeout potential in these bats against lefties last couple of years. So there's definitely some pushback. Like we said, Cortes is going to be a little funky anyway. Because they don't strike out, maybe he'll attack the zone a little bit more, and that would get us a better shot at getting into that 6th inning, which we do like for FanDuel. He did go 6.1 in that last start against Cleveland on 91 pitches. So 90 pitches, probably my expectation. I don't expect him to go too far off of that. So if we can get into 6 innings, I think there's a good chance, he leaves 3 or less earnings on the board, and hopefully we get a strikeout per inning. I will say long-term, I'm probably not expecting him to be this ridiculous when it comes to K numbers. 8 against. He's
not going to strike out half the hitters he faces all season.
Yeah, and because it's not necessarily his stuff, but more so the delivery. More tape's going to be out. More teams are going to study. Look for signs, look for tells, stuff like that. So, yeah, I do have modest expectations, but leverage, man. Neil was talking about. It's so simple to just answer questions on this slate by using the top stack tool, where it does the thinking for you. And these bigger slates, you want to get the best leverage possible and avoid the ownership because it gets chaotic. So leverage is telling us Nestor Cortes looks like a pretty lucrative option when you run this slate out.
Yep. Now to completely flip that point on its head, then, since you mentioned leverage so much and you mentioned that your top guy is Frankie Montas, you talked about being a chalk donkey with that one on the way in. Frankie Montas, currently the top ranked starter in terms of probability of being a top 2 pitcher on DK. He only costs 8,100. He's getting owned more than double that by the field. He's pushing 50% ownership in our latest update. Are we concerned about that as a leverage position, or are we just kind of riding with that, get different elsewhere, get different with bats, like you said, and you can kind of afford to get a little bit chalky with that pitcher because you like the spot so much? And what do you like about the spot?
I mean, I love the price. 8,100 he should be 10K. Like he's that good. So that's what I really like. I love that he saw over 90 pitches last at bat. Love this park for him. And the Guardians, they start off pretty hot. Bats kind of disappearing. You got to get past Jose Ramirez, and then you're good. So I think the price is letting me kind of overlook the ownership here. And I usually with pitchers, I'm a little bit more stuck on metrics than I am on ownership. Ownership is something I weight heavily for the bats because, the 4 or 5 batted ball advance, and there's a lot more volatility and variance there. With pitchers, a good pitcher is a good pitcher. I think he has a low failure rate at 8,100. And that's SB2 price point. So I that's where I'm going to be a little different. I will take, I might even go over the field just to still keep the leverage one way or the other. But yeah, I like Montas too much to go the other way at that price.
Yeah, it makes sense. And there are a couple gettable guys, like you said, in the Cleveland lineup. There's either guys that don't strike out that much, but don't present too much of a power threat, or there are guys who do strike out aggressively and they do have the power threat. Just touching on the power real quick, though, any concerns about Montas in terms of the 42.2% hard hit from last year, 11.6 degree average launch angle? He was gettable when guys could get bat on ball, but he had a 13.7% swinging strike rate, 26.6% strikeout rate that he's matched exactly so far this season. So in my opinion, I think it's pretty much there for him. But any concern about that in terms of the batted ball against any of the bigger bats in this lineup, like a Franmil Reyes, if he misses the zone, could certainly drive one. Any issues there?
Jose Ramirez, that's my issue. Can we get him out? Can we get a warning track fly? Yeah. For the most part, Pat, I'm not overly concerned. So yeah, I think Franmil does have power. You mentioned that, but there's a big part, dead balls and a good pitcher, man. I'm gonna take my chances on Montas keeping this offense at bay.
Yeah, I think that makes some sense, and that's kind of the way I'm seeing it as well. So I mentioned a couple guys off the top of the board a little bit earlier in terms of these premium starter types who are in difficult spots. And I'm thinking specifically of Aaron Nola and Lucas Giolito when I say that. Giolito going up against the Angels, Aaron Nola going up against the Mets and Queens. What do you think of those two guys? Do you have a preference, and how much are you getting to each of them? And just talk to me one after the other in terms of your favorite.
I think my biggest concern with Giolito is I don't know how often does he get to like 95 pitches tonight, right? Great. 76 in that last outing. Typically we go plus 10, plus 15, something like that if you're cruising along. So versus
seems like it would be a reasonable cap today. And that's, guys, if you're not aware, he came out in his first start with an abdominal injury, went on the IL for 10 days, came back, made a start on Sunday, and that was the one that Gunn mentioned, 76 pitches. So concern about the cap there for sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, the stuff was there. But when we go back to ownership here, he might be a little over-owned based on a flimsy pitch cap on a Friday night 13-game slate, So I found myself kind of undercutting there. And zigging where others are zagging. The stuff is there. I just don't trust the pitch count. And the Angels, like you said, they've been one of the revelations in the last week or so. There's a lot of hype, a lot of excitement about what they've been able to accomplish in the beginning weeks of the season. So Mike Trout, Ohtani, they did shake up that lineup. I don't know if you saw that. Ohtani was batting cleanup. So a little different.
I did see that. Yeah. Fletcher back in the lineup. No Taylor or no
Velasquez.
Was it Velasquez that came out at the end?
I believe so.
Yeah. So it's a different look to the lineup. Do you take anything away from that in terms of how they're stacking that team up against Giolito here? Is it just kind of maybe a better construction for them with Marsh starting to get going, Taylor Ward starting to get going, move those guys up, get them more plate appearances, move the power back a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely pop in some of the bats that they moved up. Taylor Ward is looking crazy. I was kind of surprised that he's been this good. I picked him up in season long. Brandon Marsh, I think I'm still with Ward and Marsh, I'm overcoming a strikeout fear. But we're seeing the talent. We're seeing them progress. And I think, on top of Trout and Ohtani being in the mix here. If one of Ward or Marsh can get on, certainly some stressful pitches that Giolito has to throw against those two. So that little shake up there, getting to Trout and Ohtani possibly with more runners on, and then adding Fletcher. Fletcher's pretty notorious for not striking out. Just a harder bat for Giolito to get through. So yeah, I don't have the warmer fudges here. Angels have been great. The WRC plus is fantastic, and Giolito on a potential leash. I'm willing to go the other way, and I'll take the Montas chalk, but I'll give the field to Giolito. See what happens.
Yeah, I kind of like that approach. I'm concerned about the innings as well. I left Giolito in the pool, but I've got a thin cap on him, and I'll be surprised if I get to very much of them. Does that lead you in, before we move on to the next pitcher, does that lead you into any of these Angel stacks? We'll kind of talk about it this way. If we're not going to Giolito and we do have concern about the innings, that top end is starting to look pretty appealing. And it's gone from that top heavy team where I was saying early in the season, like, I like Trout and Ohtani, maybe some Jared Walsh, maybe some Anthony Rendon, to now I kind of really like this team 1 through 6, the way they're going right now. I can use David Fletcher as a hit tool focused non-strikeout wraparound. He's very limited in terms of what he's going to give you power wise or anything. But if he's on base in front of Ward, Marsh, Trout, and Ohtani as the wraparound play for no cost, no ownership, that's fine. But really, with nobody on the top end of this lineup, all low single digits, many of these hitters under 1% owned, does it lead you into getting to some Angel stacks here?
Yeah, just because of how cheap it is to go, or how cheap ownership wise it is to go get them. Any night we can get a low own, stack that is led by Trout and Ohtani, it's worth having. And Giolito in his last 2 starts, he had a little bit of a walk issue too. So I don't expect that to be the case going forward. He's the guy that's less than 10% to both sides of the plate, but sometimes it takes some feeling out. And yeah, I just think the opportunity is pretty great in terms of how much equity you actually have to give up to say you're there, and extra implied at bets for the road team here. So it's not that I want to pick on Giolito. It's just a great opportunity to get a hot offense with some of the best players in the league at decent ownership. Where other people aren't.
There are also some premium arms in that bullpen, so you're not walking into like a cakewalk of a bullpen, but it's definitely an interesting spot with nobody there for me. On the Nola side of things, excellent starter for Philadelphia going into Queens against the Mets lineup that has been admittedly quite good so far this season. Any love for Nola here? Do you think he can squeeze anything out for us? He's 31.1% owned as the 4th or 5th ranked pitcher, but only 8,500 on DK. You got to like the price in a similar vein of where Montas is priced. 9,900, 11.4% owned on FanDuel. I'll have some probably around the field. Talk to me about what you see for Nola here.
Yeah, same thing. I think he's too talented for the price, so I can't look away. In that same vein, it's not like I want to necessarily go out of my way to pick on the Mets, but Nola's too talented for that price point. It leaves you a little bit of a soft landing if he doesn't have his grade A stuff. So he is one of my favorite tournament pitchers. I have a whole lot of lineups with Montas and Nola, and that was able to unlock a lot of salary to really get some upper echelon bats, especially high price bats. So I do have Nola in the mix. I also have Tyler Megill in the mix as well too. And I don't hate the thought of putting them both in some DK lineups, maybe throwing a blanket over a pitcher's duel and get a dub.
That's not a bad thought. I was a little bit more limited on Megill. I'm getting some really nice power marks on the top end of the Phillies lineup on the opposite side. A little bit wonky with the home run here and there for Megill, but overall, a pitcher I think has a lot of talent, decent strikeout rate. Somebody I have no issues rostering him here with Philly, just through happenstance. I don't think I'm going to have a ton of them. Can you talk me into some shares of Megill? What are you seeing here? Because he is very low owned, fair price, 9,000 on FanDuel, 5% ownership, 9,800 on DK, 8.6% ownership. Talk to me a little bit about Megill. So, sell me some Megill. Sell me this pen.
I mean, so for me, it's the fact that they space out their lefties enough that I think he can get through these righties. He has been the owner of some pretty extreme splits when you talk about that power problem. A lot of that power problem is lefties. So that's going to look good for Harper, for Kyle Schwarber. But those guys can strike out. And then if he can, limit the damage from those guys in a cooler temp game with winds blowing in the Citi Field, I think he can earn some extra strikeouts and half the lineup being righties. Last year, he had almost a 30% K rate to righties, and a short sample size this year, but he's at 35% K rate to righties. So he's looking pretty pretty pristine, and his underlying metrics, the xFIP to Sierra so far this season has been pretty good. So this isn't Citizens Bank Park. I'd be more trepidatious up there, but in Citi Field, where you can maybe put in a more pitcher friendly environment, I'm fine with taking some shots at at that type of strikeout stuff against a lineup that does have a lot of righties and some of their better hitters this year. The Castellanos, Realmutos, even Hoskins. Those are power bats that I'm trying to neutralize with this K percentage for Megill. So I'm gritting my teeth when Bryce Harper's in the batter's box. Kyle Schwarber the same, but we know those two also strike out. So I do think there's some strikeout potential here.
Love it. And he's sitting on the DK board. He's sitting 7th by probability of being a top 2 starter, and what you got to love, he's the next guy on the list after Nestor with a positive leverage score. Everybody else above him comes in at negative leverage. Some of them doubling up their probabilities of being the top starter. Aaron Nola sitting just under 15% probable of being a top 2, sitting just over 30% ownership. So you do get a nice little offset there when you go to a guy like Megill. Some other guys that are in that group of the top 7 are a lefty and a righty. Alex Wood going up against the Nationals in San Francisco. Adam Wainwright taking on the Diamondbacks in St. Louis. I get a nice projection on Waino. He's not all that overowned for the 9,400 on the DK slate. Do you see anything for Wainwright?
So Wainwright is somebody I tend to play a little bit more on FanDuel, and tonight's going to be the same approach. These guys that maybe not the best strikeout guys like a Waino can eat up innings, get you into that 6th inning, scoop and score a potential win, and more importantly, a quality start. So I will get the Wainwright over there. I don't plan on getting 9.4K Wainwright in my DraftKings lineup. So with that said, the season's young, and we have seen a lot of strikeout propensity in the D-backs lineup. So he might accidentally walk into a strikeout per inning, but I'm still kind of reserving my Wainwright exposure tonight for FanDuel.
Yeah, FanDuel's where I'm going to be getting a good amount of them as well. Hopefully, I'm not going to blow everybody's speakers out here. I just adjusted the volume up. Apparently, I was too low. Mike's giving me the big thumbs up. All right. Our excellent producer, Mike Awesemo, in the background there doing a killer job as always. So let's take a look here through the rest of the boards. Some Ian Anderson going up against Texas is appealing to me for 8,700, 8,900 from site to site. Trying to find any other guys that we didn't touch on from the upper ranges here. Anderson's probably the next guy on that list for me as far as somebody from kind of the upper tier of both talent and price that I think is in an interesting spot. Are you getting to any Ian Anderson? Because he's also extreme positive leverage, 7.4% probable to be a top 2 on DK, 0.8% ownership going up against an improved, but still certainly not scary Texas lineup here.
Yeah, I don't have any Ian Anderson right now. But I think a lot of it's just because why is he more expensive than Nola and Frankie Montas? And
Sure.
So yeah, I don't have any right now, but I wouldn't talk anyone off that ledge. It's not like I specifically want to pick on him. I do like the thought of some lefty power against him, but it's nothing that I got to go out of my way for.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, and just looking at him real quick for me, 23.2% strikeout rate, over 128 and a third last season, 11.9% swinging strikes. So I do like throwing that up against a reasonably heavy strikeout team like the Rangers here. So I think he can find some Ks, put together a nice game. But to your point, yeah, I don't know that we need him when he's priced up over those other guys, unless it's just a pure leverage play. So I'll have some shares for leverage. I'll have a couple stakes in the ground on him, but not a guy I'm necessarily going out of my way for with the other options available. Anybody that we didn't touch on from like the top end that you want to call out of the premium high price pitchers, like any love for a Kluber going up against the high strikeout Twins lineup for price or anybody like that?
No, I was mostly staying away from Kluber. I was thinking about Alex Wood. Right now, I don't have any of them. And then for DK, I'm gonna get some of Tanner Houck, but I'm not gonna grab him on FanDuel because he wouldn't be able to steal us a quality start. So. I think we covered most of what I'm
that makes sense. So why don't we use Houck as the midpoint there, and I'll let me do a quick read here because we skipped over the probably a couple pieces of business, but we'll use Houck as the swing point into some of the lower cost pitchers, and we'll tie that into stacks. We got about a half hour. So guys, Awesemo plus MLB, you like all this stuff we've been talking about baseball? Think it's pretty sharp. Want to check out pitchers, the top stacks. It's all included in there. You can get the platinum plan, $29.95 a week. That gets you access to every single sport that we cover. Fantasy Cruncher, our hosted optimizer, is always a paid add-on to any of these subscriptions, but you can get in there $29.95 a week to gain access to everything. If you want just MLB plans, you can get on those for individual weeks, individual months at a low price for single sport plans. We've got single sport plans for everything that we put together. But if you're going to be playing, more than one or two different things, say you want to play some MLB this summer, but you're also going to play some PGA, maybe a couple NASCAR races, maybe a couple MMA fights that are coming up, you want to get on that platinum plan. So $29.95 a week, killer value. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. I'm going to hit the Odd Shopper one again also here real quick, just because we're about the halfway point of the show, and I just want to soak up all the time we can to talk about the back end of this stuff. Odd Shopper is our sister site. It's a killer resource for sports betting, you guys. Sports betting is going wide across the country. State after state is gaining access to it. People are writing in all the time with new questions of, just became legal. Where do I go? What do I look at? Go to Odd Shopper. Check it out. It's the fastest, easiest resource, the best bets you can find in 30 seconds or less. A couple of clicks will get you to the best possible version of whatever bet that you want, guys. So you jump in there, features hundreds of daily bets, hundreds of bets daily to give you the edge you need. Betting NBA, NHL, we're getting MLB up there. Expected win rates, ROI is included. Uses the same DFS projections that Alex cranks out for the site. So it is just an excellent resource. There's a parlay builder. There's an arbitrage tool that identifies risk-free betting. You can't beat risk-free betting, Gun. So guys, jump over to Odd Shopper, the description, the link, all of it's down there, and check that out. Start making smarter bets. Stop throwing your money away. Let's dive into some value pitchers. There's only a few of them from where I'm sitting, so I think it'll be a pretty quick conversation. But I do think Tanner Houck at 8,100, it's the upper end maybe of what you call a value salary, but I do think you can combine him with some other guys. Talk to me a little bit about him, because he's a premium guy. Somebody in the chat asked earlier, and he's a positive leverage.
Yeah, so he's going to come in as the long reliever, even though he has started some games this season. So Rich Hill is going to open up. You might get a couple innings out of him, and then you hand the ball over to Hawk, who is really, really good. And if he was starting this game, I would be a little higher on Hawk on both sides, but more so on FanDuel. FanDuel, you guys know, you get that quality start bonus, and you have to start to get that. So you do leave that off the table. So that's what I say. I'm a little bit more on the DraftKings side at 8,100. Just a soft landing price. If he doesn't have his best stuff, he did skip out that Toronto series for reasons, obviously. But he did show a couple of games of 5-inning potential. So maybe 70 to 80 pitches is there for him. And I think his strikeout stuff is elite. I'm sure you guys know by now, he's essentially the right-handed Chris Sale, and the Orioles strike out quite a bit, and they've even made Camden more convenient for pitchers. So I like the thought of Hawk, especially on DK, but I find myself struggling to get to him on FanDuel.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. The FanDuel, losing the QS is a little bit challenging on the FanDuel slate, unfortunately. For value, when we're talking about guys in the 7s, the 6s on the DK slate, there's options like you say Kikuchi going up against the just lethal Astros. I don't want any part of that, even for 6,400, really. I'm getting a weird projection on Aaron Savali just because of how my model treats this version of the Athletics lineup, but he's kind of a not high-end starter in terms of strikeouts. Maybe he eats some innings here for us, finds a couple Ks for 6,900, 6,200 on FanDuel. Guys like Adrian Hauser going up against the low-end Cubs lineup for 73. Chris Bubich, I want no part of against our Yankees. Mad Bum against the Cardinals, right-handed power, same story. Hunter Green, a high-end rookie with an elite fastball, but some vertical movement in his stuff. That could be a challenge at Coors Field. Where else are you looking for value on this slate?
Yeah, I was thinking if I was desperate, man, if I was dumpster diving, I thought about about Hunter Green. No Chris Bryant in that lineup. That fastball will play just about anywhere if the velo's there. But after a while, you can start cheating fastball, and Coors can be Coors. And the other guy was, if I wanted to get cute, maybe the kid for the Orioles, Kyle Bradish. He's only on DraftKings. He's 4K. Looking at his numbers, he's in the shadows of Grayson Rodriguez, and that's a really good shadow to be in when it comes to prospect pitchers. It's always hard to trust prospect pitchers in the big leagues here, but he is essentially stretched out. We've seen him in his last couple minor league starts. Matter of fact, his last outing, he got to 6 innings. In the innings that he's pitched so far, which is 15, he has 17 Ks to just 3 walks, hasn't allowed a bomb, keeps the ball on the ground, and a whip sub 1. 4K, you could probably do worse if you really are down bad and you just want to get super creative at pitcher. But that's about it. I don't like to get too cute. I don't need to put makeup on and get cute on the pitcher side of the slate. I'll just do that with the bats.
Yeah, I think we're both more comfortable getting cute with the bat side of things at the plate. Bradish does rank out easily our top two value pitcher on DK slate. 33% probability of being the top 2 value, only a 4.2% probability of being a top 2 starter, but he does come with nice positive leverage, 2.9% owned over there. So there is some room there. Looking at in terms of sorting by the top values, it's several guys that I mentioned before in terms of Kikuchi, Savali, Hunter Green, Tyler Anderson's on that list, but he's up at 7,700. I don't think I'm really going there. 11.8% probability of being a top 2, 10.6% owned. He's efficiently owned, but I guess that's at least warrants the question. Would you roster any Tyler Anderson on DK? Are you going there at all?
I currently have none.
Yeah, it's not a spot. I'm just not comfy with the pitcher, really. It's not a pitcher I think is real and not somebody that I think is going to succeed for us. Outside of that, the only other name on this list is Antonio Senzatella. I'm not taking any shots of him, even with all that weight of ownership and everything else on the Cincinnati side. So maybe that's a good entry point to jump over to that Coors game. But let's talk about it from the bats perspective. And we have to lead off with these ridiculously mispriced Reds. It was the first thing I noticed this morning. The average salary for the Reds lineup that was projected this morning, and it is basically the one that came in. Let me double check. Yeah, the average salary is $2,700 for the confirmed Reds starting lineup on DK. The average salary on FanDuel for the Reds confirmed starting lineup, $2,900. These guys are all priced at $3,000 or below, except for Jonathan India on both sites. How much are you getting to them? Do you think they're owned enough based on where we've got them projected and based on the matchup here, the highest run total on the board, going up against Senzatella, Coors Field, all of it? Do you think they're actually owned high enough? And what are you doing with
them? Yeah, I mean, we have them second on the ownership over here on it's just FanDuel and then on DraftKings. I think they are owned enough. I was expecting them to be over owned, and on DK their number 15.5% versus the 9.5% top stack percentage. It's just one of those situations where I was hoping they would be the highest owned team, but aggressively high owned. 15.5%. I can understand it at that one. At that ownership, it's still a 13-game Friday night slate. And when you start weeding through the bushes here, the Reds are the worst team in baseball so far in WRC plus. Yep. Senzatella, while his strikeout stuff, he doesn't strike people out, he's a big ground ball guy, so he can eat some innings and kind of play spoiler here. I'm willing to undercut Coors tonight just based on what I thought was going to be a high owned pivot spot. With that said, there's no way I'm going into battle without some Tommy Pham, some Joey Votto, guys like that. It's really just the mixing and fading the bum level guys that I'm a little less inclined to get behind. So I found myself with some Reds exposure, but I think I'm a full fade the full stack and just let the one-offs fall in, because they're going to fall in on any projection model and go from there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You can get to a different, a decent selection of different one-offs here. If you're stacking, you mentioned, you don't have much love for the bum kind of guys, but to me, I'm looking at 20+% ownership on the top 4 hitters in that lineup on DK: Indian, Naquin, Pham, and Votto. Those are the 4 hitters that I do want to be in business with here. And it's very similar going across to the FanDuel slate. And then the ownership kind of does drop off a cliff once you get to Kyle Farmer hitting 5th, Brandon Drury, Mike Moustakas hitting 7th, 13% ownership for 2,100. It's not too long ago Mike Moustakas was hitting 30 some odd home runs and had a 200 and change ISO and was a premium lefty bat to throw against a weak right-handed contact oriented pitcher in Coors Field. I can maybe get behind a little bit of that. I can maybe build some stacks, but I'm going to come in well under the field on their stacks. If you're looking at Coors Field in general, though, you said you're going to come in light on Coors. Does that actually apply to the other side of this game with the Rockies going up against Hunter Green? You mentioned it, the premium electric plus fastball, 80 grade in traditional scouting is as good as it gets. He's got a ridiculous fastball, but he does focus on vertical movement in some of his other pitches. And he does have a somewhat limited repertoire and a propensity for walking guys. All of that adds up to me to, maybe a pitcher who could be a little bit of trouble, a little bit over his head, making his first Coors start. And all the Rockies, they're priced up to normal Coors prices. They're all owned under 10% and fairly well under 10%, leaving them positively leveraged on both sites. Do you have love for the Rockies stack going up against Green here?
Yeah, I do, because you don't have to give up a ton of equity to get there. We have an 8% chance to be in a top stack, 6.3% ownership share. It does get a little bit watered down. Chris Bryant goes to the IL, but CJ Cron, man, he's going to flirt with, leading the league in homers. And Hunter Green does have an electric fastball, but 60+% of the time it's coming. So maybe the team starts either one cheating on the fastball, or like you said, his command issues start putting ducks on the pond. And that sets up the big inning, and it also wastes his pitch count. And maybe you get into that bullpen a little faster. I think the pricing on the Rockies kept them too cheap, and I'd be willing to get there. And like I said, at 8%, 9%, I'd be positively leveraged without being egregious about it. I never thought I'd be paying almost $6K for Connor Joe, man, but here we go. Connor Joe leading off of 5.8. I'm in on that. And then 1 through 4 looks pretty well. Much like the Reds lineup, that tends to fall off a cliff after you get to the cleanup spot. But Coors, and both these bullpens are not units that I'm running from.
Yeah, I like that. I'm with you, basically top to bottom there. Sammy Hilliard, lefty righty, a little bit of power there. Maybe hitting 7th is a little bit of a sneaky spot. 2,900 on DK, 25 on FanDuel, 5-ish% owned. But again, everybody in this lineup, despite no Chris Bryant, which does suck, everybody under 10%. I can definitely get to some Rockies here. Who's your next favorite stack? You call the next one where we're going.
All right. I have an ongoing feud with a man named Madison Bumgarner. I've been trying to get him to cave in for like 2 years now, and I can't get that blow up game, man.
I've been on the other side of that one. I traded for him in my dynasty league last year because he cost $1 a year the rest of his career. He's only 32. I still believe.
Yeah, I mean, and he's been surviving, and some of his numbers are looking a little better, but just being more of a contact guy against this Cardinals lineup just has my eyes lighting up. And I'm at the slot machine, Terry, and I'm not about to get up and walk away while old Edith sits down and puts 1 quarter in on a Cardinal stack and gets 5 bombs. So I'm going crazy with the Cards bats here. They are killing my bomb detector. So they are probably my favorite stack.
Yeah, I like that spot quite a bit. I mentioned it on in the chat on the show this morning. Love Bumgarner still believe. Don't think this is the spot by any means. I will have 0.0 shares, and I definitely want to grab some of that right-handed power from the Cardinals. Tommy Edman, Paul Goldschmidt, Tyler O'Neill, Nolan Arenado, sign me up. Low-owned Albert Pujols, I can get into that for 2,400, 3,500 from site to site. Dylan Carlson, Harrison Bader, Paul DeJong hitting 9th I can use. There's a lot of righty quality in that lineup, so I agree, top to bottom. Would you get to any of that bottom end? Like, would you use DeJong in any of your lineups, be it as a wraparound or a one-off because he's hitting 9th?
Yeah, sure. Why not? It would, obviously, just a little bit, but not a bunch. Yachty the same. If they fall into a catcher spot, cool.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. It's just, you'll take what you get there when those guys are 0.5% owned. I think there's some upside to that part of the discussion. So I think we've put it off as long as possible for a couple guys wearing the hats that we typically do on these shows, but our boys are at the top of the board again. And I know everybody gets tired of hearing us talk about it, but tell me about these Yankees going up against Mr. Bubic here, because they're definitely a big beacon of power for me. Even no Donaldson, no Joey Gallo in the lineup tonight. It's still a homer-happy lineup. It's still one that leads the slate in terms of probability of being the top stack. What are we doing with our Yankees tonight?
I'm stacking them up. I always thought, put asterisks next to it, but yeah, they showed you in the last couple games that, hey man, these bats ain't going to be bad for long. Aaron Hicks coming back off of paternity leave, little baby game narrative. Joey Gallo gets a day off against a lefty. Cool. I got a lot of interest in picking on Chris Bubich. He's just really, really not good. I would say, if you're taking notes, look out for weather in this game. It does exist. So look out for that. And that's something to keep in mind if you want to play Nestor Cortes as well. But yeah, there's there's not many pitchers that I'm not going to load up on some Yankee stacks, and it's definitely not going to be Chris Bubich. So give him
totally
to me.
with you. Yeah, we're going to be riding these Yankees all year, guys. That's just what happens when you assemble a lineup that is just made up of some of the best on base and home run hitting guys in the league. And that's just the numbers saying that. That's not us being Yankee fans. Any concern, speaking of being Yankee fans, this is not the premium version of the back end of this lineup by any means. We get Aaron Hicks, we get IKF in the 7 spot, Tim LaCastro, and then the ridiculously struggling Kyle Higashioka in the 9 spot. So any concerns just that the back end maybe doesn't hold up their side of the bargain, doesn't turn the lineup over well enough for them? Not to say that we're going to Bubich here, but just any concerns that maybe we get a couple of those strikeouts on the top end, back end doesn't turn the lineup over, and it's a limited kind of a game for the Yanks?
Oh yeah, whenever the Yankees make sense, they drop 2 runs and lose. Like it is what it is. But no, I'm not. I mean, obviously, I'd be lower on Higashioka. LaCastro, I think he would be a sub candidate if the game somehow stayed close. But he's the fastest guy in baseball. If he gets on, that's going to be a stolen base or 2. He'll challenge the Royals and their pitching staff. IKF has been hitting. Aaron Hicks gets way too much hate so far this season. His bat's been fine, right? You'd like to see more power, but he put the ball in play. And then, the middle of that lineup is definitely where the question is. I think the linchpin, what can Glaber, what can Hicks do today? Because the top 4 are certainly been on fire, and DJ's looking like old DJ. So a little bit, but I'd be playing him all through and through. Higashioka, if I ended up with none of him, I'm not going to lose sleep. His bat has been that cold after that ridiculous spring training. But the rest of that lineup has
homers in Florida, man. That has gotten ugly. I don't know where it is now, but the other day I looked at his WRC plus and it was a -15. So it was 115% worse than average creating runs. So not a great start for Higgy. Definitely, yeah. Don't sleep on Aaron Hicks, 3,900, 3.5% owned in the middle of that lineup on DK, 2,500 on FanDuel, 5.8% owned. I can definitely get into the Hicks business. I'll have some Hicks one-offs at those prices as well. I love the power, love the ability to get on base, put the ball in play. Jumping around, we've got a couple negatively leveraged teams that are kind of premium teams we talk about all the time, but they're at the top of the board again. They're even drawing decent, the Braves anyway are drawing a decent value mark. The Dodgers are ridiculously high priced because of the Dodgers, but both of those teams negatively leveraged on the DK slate. And then right after them on the board, similarly ranked, is the Red Sox. And they get into a positive leverage situation with the Astros, who in terms of probability look basically the same, but they're not drawing as much ownership. Talk to me about that group of teams. There's 4 teams there, and that's kind of the next tier to me. What do you think of those squads and kind of how you're splitting up ownership between them?
I think that, obviously the Astros and Blue Jays can get into a little shootout here. Kikuchi, he can go short. He can get hit up by righties. This isn't the A squad for the Astros, so I have some tapered expectations, but still plenty of power against lefties in that lineup. McCormick leading off, 230 plus ISO against lefties the last couple of years. Bregman, Alvarez smashes lefties just as well. Yuli Gurriel, upside his brother on the other dugout, and even Kyle Tucker putting the ball over the fence lately. So I think the Astros stack is always in play for me. And then same on the other hand. You mentioned the Braves. I was hoping that lineup would look a little bit more Acuna-y.
I think we all were
with Travis Demeritte, but I think it's fine to target them. The Rangers situation, the Rangers have one of the worst bullpens in baseball so far. And so this is going to be a spot where we're betting on talent because they might not see the same pitcher twice. Richards might open, and then I want to say it was like Sam. It was the kid from the Philadelphia, Spencer Howard, is expected to come in, and he's not good either. So a lot of quality at bats. Although there's not going to see the same pitcher twice, more than likely. None of the pitchers are anything to be scared of. So I do like the Braves just as a talented unit there. I really wish Acuna would have hung in there. But this is just a really fun lineup to get behind.
Yeah, debuted last night with only the one game going and no real slate to speak of, and then out of the lineup today. But we'll get him hopefully over the weekend. Maybe we see a pinch hit and some action from him tonight while we're watching this game. I think the Braves are interesting in terms of how their cost looks on the DK slate too. Looking at the salaries, you mentioned Demerit leading off, dead minimum 2,000. He's pulling 11% ownership. Then you get that block of 49, 45, 41, 5,000 from Olsen, Riley, Ozuna, and Albies, and then it drops back into the low 2,000s again. And fair ownership around Adam Duvall. You're talking about Guillermo Heredia and William Contreras in the middle of that, but then Dansby Swanson at the bottom for 28. I'm interested in Duvall. I'm interested in Swanson and how they connect in with the stack. And then if I can just use those other guys, if I need to, as like cheap offsets, I think there are interesting ways to offset some of the ownership, some of the cost around this stack. So I like the way they come together on the DK slate. And then I don't really get concerned because they're lower owned on FanDuel to a pretty good degree through most of the middle. Ozzy Albies for 2.6% ownership. Yes, please. Pretty much any day of the week.
Mhm.
What about the Dodgers? I think we mentioned them and didn't talk about them. Talk to me a little on the Dodgers here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. Negative leverage. There's been a bunch of slates where I can get them while people are sleeping on them. They just they look really good, so the feel is on it. And if you want to get there, you either have to give up a lot of lineups for any type of leverage, or you just kind of match the field. Alexander's been really, really more of a contact guy. So if you're going to dare the Dodgers to put the ball in play, bad things happen to good people. They have a 5.4 implied run total. It's a really, really nice spot for them pre-flop. So if you're a contrarian guy, fade them for the positive leverage. But this is the bad part of positive leverage, Terry, is you have to sweat. Like I like fading the chalk that is at 7, because then I feel like I got a chance. And then if my lineups are kind of quiet and I know the chalk train Dodgers are on deck, then I'm gritting every pitch. So I have Dodgers right now as my fourth highest on stack.
That's a little dicey. Yeah, fading Dodgers on just any given night is starting to turn into like fading Coors and that kind of a sweat and worrying about that. Looking at the board here, going down the list by probability of success, the Giants kind of stick out for positive leverage on the DK slate, 4.6% probable of being the top stack. Only the Yankees sit at a double-digit mark. They're at 10.1. And then, so we're talking about, essentially half the probability, not a lot of ownership, a 2.2% ownership share, a 2.4 leverage score here for the Giants. What I don't love about them is they're a pretty decent home run hitting team. They've got a good amount of power from some guys who are not necessarily name brands. They're going up against Aaron Sanchez, who historically has been a decent ground ball pitcher, a guy who's good at keeping the ball in the park, some line drive, some ground ball, and not a ton of fly ball. Are you worried at all about their ability to elevate the ball, get it out of the yard against Aaron Sanchez here? Is it impacting your ability to get the Giants, or do you see them as pretty strong, a pretty strong stacking option here?
I'm lukewarm on them. I have on the back end of my stacks. I'm not going out of my way to full send it, but I'm going to have some because I do think Sanchez is beatable. He's a contact guy. Like I said, you put the ball in play.
Yeah, no strikeouts.
Things happen.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to approach it. For me, it'll probably just get limited out through my model with certainly no time to change it while we're talking this stuff through. But I don't know that I'm going to be kicking myself by the end of the night saying, oh man, I wish I had Giants. I think that they're going to come in. They score a few runs against them, but don't have a Giant game here. Looking at some of the value plays on the board, let me hang on one second. Actually, let me unwind that. See if we can do any business. Hey, Mike, I'm going to skip. I'm going to skip over the slideshow for the Hall of Fame here, Mike, just because we got a lot to talk about still. So don't throw up the slideshow, Mike. But guys, you're familiar with the Awesemo Hall of Fame. We've got all those people that we call out their names. I'm sure Dave DeRemmer's got a new tweet in there that he sent us from winning another $1,000 bet this week. So you get people like that who are regulars, but we get wins from people who win $20, wins from people who win $20,000, and they just make us feel good. But what they can do for you guys, if you finish in the top 3 of a contest with more than 5,000 people in it, tweet it our way to at Awesemo HOF. That's our Hall of Fame account. Send us a little screenshot of a qualifying win. Get in touch with me at the support desk. We're going to get you, either me or Ron, we're going to get you a promo code for a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum for doing such a good job. That's if you have our logo on your handle on either DraftKings or FanDuel. All right, that's the Hall of Fame. Congratulations to all the people who have talked to us and sent in their wins. We really appreciate it. Moving on, let's talk about some of these values. We talked about one of the biggest value stacks off the top of the board with the Reds. That was the obvious one. Where else are we going for value stacks here? Are you looking at any of the Orioles? They come up number 2 in terms of our top stack probability on the DK board for value. In terms of the FanDuel board for value, we're looking at the Reds followed by the Yankees, believe it or not, at an 8.2. Then we've got some Brewers, some Diamondbacks. Where are we looking for some cheap bats on this, Lake?
I mean, the Reds, if I really have to stretch my pennies, I do want to say, I think we skipped over one of my, I was able to talk about the Cardinals. I want to talk about the White Sox. I liked him against Thor because Thor, he allows a lot of base runners. Then he got scratched. Well, the Angels bullpen have allowed the most homers in the league so far. This Herget guy doesn't look great. And looking at the bullpen usage for the last couple days for the Angels in that 4-game series with the Guardians, they went to Raisel Iglesias in 3 of his last 4 games. He's their best arm. He probably doesn't pitch. They went to Aaron Loop 2 of the last 3 games, so maybe that makes him unavailable. They tend to use him every other day. So you might see a lot of less than average pitching. And the White Sox added Luis Robert back into the mix today. So I think that's some speed and power in the middle of that lineup. And maybe I'm a sucker for the White Sox long term, but I don't know that everyone's completely adjusted here for this White Sox matchup. And I know, the Angels have had a lot of hype on that starting pitching staff and their offense, but hey, that bullpen can get got. And they've, like I said, allowed the most balls over the fence.
Yeah, for sure. And this is a team that we've talked about a lot through the early part of the season. They've dealt with a few injuries in the early going. You mentioned Luis Robert coming back though for this one. So yeah, Oh, I'm hearing myself now. That was weird. I thought you were saying something, and it turned out to be me from a couple seconds ago. But going up against Jimmy Herget, who is a 5.0 ERA, 5.0 xFIP kind of guy over a small sample of his career, I just don't think there's very much there for him to worry about with him. So yeah, I can fire away with some of these White Sox bats: Timmy Anderson, Andrew Vaughn, Jasmani Grandal, Jose Abreu, Luis Robert, Gavin Sheets, and Jake Berger, even toward the back end of that lineup. I don't have a lot of love for Josh Harrison and Lurie Garcia on any given slate, but they give you very cheap multi-position eligibility if you need it. 33 and 3,400 on DK, second and third base, second and shortstop, 2,100 for both of them on FanDuel, same multi-position eligibility. So just with the ability to move this team around on the board, and they come at cheap prices for all that upside, I do like that. That's a really good call there. And they're kind of a good value stack. I mean, looking at the FanDuel pricing, for the most part, in the low to mid 3s and the mid 2s on DK, everybody other than Tim Anderson below 5,000. That's a really good call and a stack that people might be sleeping on because of the Syndergaard matchup from earlier in the day. Outside of that, where are we going for some value stacks? Who do we like in terms of value? Were you getting any of those Orioles who were the second ranked value stack on the DK slate, but with very low probability of coming in a top finisher?
I mean, like we said, that they're gonna, maybe you get one off of Rich Hill, but Tanner Houck is a really good pitcher. So I don't want to pick on him. So I didn't have hopes for them. They messed that ballpark up, and it's been very, very positive for pitchers. So no, I don't have none there. Atlanta, yeah, I'm there on that. Boston, I'm kind of lukewarm. I mentioned I was hyping up Bradish earlier, but hey, we've seen guys get called up and get the jitters in their first big league start. No JD Martinez in this incarnation of the Red Sox lineup, so I'd just be looking at Rafi Devers and guys like that. But hey, Franchi Cordero has a little bit of pop. He's 2K bare bones min. But no, I didn't feel like today was a slate where I needed a value stack to go get a 10, 12K pitcher. It's pretty free to do whatever you want tonight.
Yeah, very much a, kind of use whatever bats, whatever arms you want kind of approach from site to site. So I think that's a good spot. Maybe we'll jump off, see if we can get any questions in, guys. Send in your questions. Gunn and I always do home run picks in our various articles on our various shows. We're making some picks for stacks, for arms as we go through here. So we'll do those. But if any questions come up, guys, I'll scroll through the chat, see if we've had any pop up yet. Let's see. Who are the home run calls? Is Warren Scott asked. So Gunn, why don't we just dive into the bomb detector and take a look at what who the home run calls are, and then we'll look at some of these questions, and hopefully a few more questions come on while we're doing that.
I mean, there's a lot of Cardinals up there. A lot, including our pool hosts. But I got Tyler O'Neill at the top. I got Goldie and Arenado. Those are literally 1, 2, and 3 in my bomb detector. That's why I'm so bullish on them and hoping for that big game. Pat Stats, usual suspects, Judgy, Salvi, guys like that. See if there's a fun name that we wouldn't expect hiding in this list. Austin Riley, but we talked about Braves might only see one guy for each at bat. No, I don't have any sneaky names up here. Bader's up there, but that's more Mad Bum than anything.
Yep. Yeah, I got a lot of those names in the top of mine. Tyler O'Neill sitting 3rd overall. I do have Vladdy up at the very top of it, and Kyle Schwarber, who was my home run pick in my column. I mentioned, some of the power marks against McGill maybe were on the board, maybe putting Philly on the board a little bit for me. So he popped up there for me. Getting some Devers up there, a lot of Yankees, like you mentioned, between Stanton, between Judgy, a couple of those two are up at the top. A couple of guys who aren't playing are also up there. Bobby Dahlbeck also up there, but he's not playing. I'm trying to find guys who are in the lineups. Randall Grichuk is interesting. CJ Cron is interesting from the Rockies, who we talked about being under owned. So I'm getting a lot of those. And then, a lot of the mix that you talked about in yours. Nice number for Jordan Alvarez from the Astros. I wrote up the Astros as my leverage stack of the day, my featured stack of the day. So I really like the way they look. And then I like some of these Rockies, some of these Yanks. Let's talk in terms of your favorite overall stack. Like, what would be your ideal lineup build without giving too much away and talking about your favorite lineup that you have built? What's like your ideal feel for a build for a lineup today in terms of like these pitchers and these teams maybe instead of the lineups?
Yeah, I mean, so like I said, I'll bite the chalk on Montas. I think he's just too good of a pitcher, too good of a price to pass up. And I'm getting different with my bats, and I'm getting a really low ownership across the board on St. Louis. If I'm getting sub 5% ownership on a stack, that's killing my bomb detector. I'm going to be in on that. And then, like I said, I like the White Sox. So I'll take the chalk pitcher, but give me some low-owned White Sox and Cardinals spun together.
There you go. I like that. I'll ride with you on that St. Louis call. I definitely like the Astros, definitely like our Yankees. They're a little bit popular, but I think we can get away with it on some of the individual ownership there. And let's see. I forget, Mike, are we going to top of the hour or to the 05? I forget which we were doing here. 7 o'clock. All right. So we are coming up on the end of it. So let's see if we can find like one little question to get us up and out of here. So Charles Kelly in the chat asked, and I'll throw it to you, Gun, Tyler Anderson and Brandon Lau or Hunter Green and Christian Yelich for a FanDuel GPP.
Holy cow. Oh my God. What? Wait, what's the pitch? Hunter Green or Tyler Anderson?
It was Tyler Anderson and Brandon Lau or Hunter Green and Christian Yelich on FanDuel.
I don't trust Anderson to go 6, so I don't really trust Green to go 6 either. I guess the Green side for strikeout upside, but I'm not in love.
The guy's got 5 minutes left. Erase it and start over might be a viable answer there.
Yeah, I think if I'm gonna say if you're new, getting cute at pitching is probably the least successful approach to DFS. There's gonna be plenty of 2K bombs out there, but there's not as many big games out of pitching. So I'd be a little less likely to punt pitchers the more pitching options there are.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. If it was just those choices, gun to my head, I'd probably go the Green and Yelich side, just maybe a few more strikeouts for a kid like Hunter Green with that live arm, and Christian Yelich, former MVP, although I do love Brandon Lau. So guys, that brings us up basically toward the end of the show here. So good luck to everybody out there. Thanks, Gun. Killer job analyzing all this stuff and tearing through this slate in a chaotic fashion. Stick around. We've got the NBA Deeper Dive and NBA Live Before Lock coming up. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe, check out all the sponsors. We appreciate you hanging out with us. Good luck.